of its toughest sanctions.
New sanctions.
U.S. sanctions.
New tough sanctions.
Sanctions.
New sanctions.
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 Today, millions of innocent civilians are suffering in the hands of destructive regimes and groups around the world. To counter these unjust authoritative leaderships, we have equipped the global community with a tool called economic sanctions to condemn these extremist ideals in a manner that would result in peaceful negotiation. However, we have not yet come to learn from history that implementing economic sanctions more often than not fails in revoking harmful leaderships. Instead, these sanctions completely missed a mark by wrongfully targeting already freedom-deprived innocent citizens. Various studies have shown that the majority of traditional sanctions inflicted in the 20th and 21st century cannot be deemed as successful. Although sanctions were created to stop specific harmful groups from inflicting further threats upon the world, we place sanctions on entire countries. This action results in having harmless civilians fall into further poverty, while problematic leaders continue to thrive using pre-existing wealth. Just listen to what the president of the National Iranian American Council, Teita Parsi, has to say about the realities of imposing economic sanctions on Iran.
We have to recognize the Iranian government is absolutely responsible for all of the repression, the corruption, and all of the problems that exist there. But how is that possibly an excuse for the international community to say, well, because the government is doing this, it's okay for us to also punish the Iranian people?
So am I
because
hearing the responsibilities on the international community?
Well, I think the responsibilities all over the place. The Iranian government has a responsibility not to repress their people. The international community has a responsibility to find solutions that target the right people and does not target the wrong people. Because that's what we're doing right now. We can't say just because the Iranian government is doing these things, it's okay for the rest of the world to put even more pressure and even more suffering on the Iranian people.
The majority of the time, problematic leaders are barely affected by economic sanctions, causing the need for alternative actions. A prime example would be the UN-inflicted sanctions placed upon Iraq, which, according to many sources, including UNICEF, left Iraqi citizens poverty-stricken and in a humanitarian crisis, and resulted in the death of upwards of 500,000 children. This occurred while Saddam Hussein and his regime were scarcely affected and had to be deposed with alternative methods. Because of this reality, it is vital to replace this harmful mechanism with an alternative tool named Smart Sanctions. This experimental alternative is a reformed method of economic sanctions and is designed to specifically target dangerous leaderships without harming the general population, and is being experimented with by the United States and the European Union. Smart Sanctions exclusively target oppressive leaders or groups by blacklisting certain members and significantly affecting their travel and economic capacities, peacefully forcing them to abide by the criteria of the United Nations. Its effectiveness has been proven through the smart sanctions directly placed upon Russian leader Vladimir Putin and his allies because of their attacks on the Ukraine. This act includes freezing these adversaries' international assets, banning travel to numerous countries, and ostracizing them, making it remarkably harder for damaging actions to occur. The United States and Canada have also been dabbling with ideas such as smart sanctions with the American Magnitsky Act and the Canadian Justice for Victims of Corrupt Foreign Officials Act. Both of these acts uphold the ideas of smart sanctions, but only implement them specifically on certain Russian officials. Listen to Sergei Magnitsky's wife talk about the importance of acts like these.
Natalia, you mentioned that it's a global effort to deal with human rights abuses. But initially, even this government was reluctant to pass the act. There was concern at some levels that there was another way of dealing with Russia, with human rights concerns, that they didn't want to agitate Vladimir Putin. What would you say to countries that are frightened about passing a Magnitsky Act because of that?
Well, I think I already mentioned that it's a global law, and I think that priority tasks of any government is to fight corruption around the world.
Although smart sanctions are only a trial format, they have been proven to do as much, if not more, as traditional sanctions have done in condemning problematic leaderships. And they do this while having no unintentional negative effects on innocent citizens. We must replace traditional economic sanctions with effective and advanced smart sanctions.